The cost of BrahMos missile, strategic economics, industrial power, and the price of supersonic dominance. Introduction. Pricing in the modern warfare. The cost of a weapon system is not merely a financial figure, it is a compressed expression of technological capability, geopolitical alignment, industrial depth, and strategic intent. The BrahMos missile sits at the intersection of these forces, with an estimated per-unit cost ranging roughly around 3.5 million and 5.5 million depending on variant and configuration. BrahMos is neither the cheapest nor the most expensive missile in the global arsenal. Its pricing reflects a deliberate balance between performance, deterrence, value, and export competitiveness. Understanding the cost requires unpacking layers of engineering, supply chains, and doctrinal use, as well as strategic signaling. Baseline cost structure. What the price tag represents. At the surface level, the cost of a BrahMos missile appears straightforward, a few $1 million per unit. However, this number is a composite of multiple subsystems, each of which carries its own curve. The propulsion system built around a liquid fuel ramjet is one of the primary cost drivers due to its complexity and performance. The guidance system incorporating inertial navigation combined with satellite updates and terminal active radar homing adds another layer of expense tied to precision and survivability in contested environments. The airframe designed to withstand sustained supersonic speeds around Mach 2.8 to 3 demands high-grade materials and tight manufacturing tolerances. Warhead configuration, typically around 200 to 300 kilograms, is less of a cost driver compared to propulsion and electronics, but still contributes to the overall valuation. Integration costs vary significantly depending on the launch platform, whether it is land-based mobile launchers, naval vertical launch systems, submarine or aircraft such as Sukhoi Su-30 MKIs. Variant-based cost differentiation. The BrahMos system is not monolithic. The base variant designed for land and naval deployment with a range originally capped at around 290 kilometers due to export control regimes sit at the lower end of the cost spectrum. Extended range variants now exceeding 500 to 600 kilometers after regulatory relaxation command a higher price due to enhanced propulsion efficiency and upgraded guidance. Air-launched variants, particularly BrahMos A, are more expensive due to structural modifications required for aerial deployment, weight optimization, and integration with aircraft avionics. These missiles must withstand different aerodynamic stress during release and ignition phases. Increasing engineering complexity, the projected hypersonic successor, BrahMos 2, is expected to escalate costs dramatically, potentially exceeding $10 million per unit, reflecting the exponential increase in technological difficulty as speed approach Mach 6 to Mach 7. R&D, amortization, and the economies of scale. A critical but often ignored dimension of cost is research and development amortization. The BrahMos program is a joint venture between BrahMos Aerospace, involving Indian and Russian design bureaus. Initial development costs, including testing, prototyping, and integration trials, runs into billions of dollars. These costs are not directly visible in the per unit price but are gradually absorbed as production scales. Economies of scale play a decisive role. As production volume increases, the marginal cost per missile declines due to optimized supply chains, improved manufacturing efficiency, and standardization of components. However, the BrahMos system is not produced at scale of mass consumption weapons like artillery shells or small arms. It is relatively limited production volume keeps unit costs elevated compared to simpler munitions. Comparative cost analysis, positioning BrahMos in the global arsenal. To understand whether BrahMos is expensive, it must be positioned relative to comparable systems. The American Tomahawk missile costs approximately 1.5 to 2 million per unit, significantly cheaper than BrahMos. However, the Tomahawk operates at subsonic speeds, making it more vulnerable to modern air defense systems. On the other hand, advanced hypersonic systems under development in the United States, Russia, and China are expected to cost upwards $10 to $20 million per unit. In this context, BrahMos occupies a middle ground, significantly more expensive than legacy supersonic cruise missile but cheaper than next generation hypersonic weapons, while offering, while offering superior survivability due to its speed. The pricing reflects a trade off. BrahMos is designed to penetrate high value targets in contested environments where subsonic missiles might fail. Therefore, its cost must be evaluated not per unit but per successful strike probability. Cost of deployment beyond the missile itself. Focusing solely on per missile cost is analytically incomplete. The total cost of deploying BrahMos includes launch platforms, maintenance infrastructure, training, and logistical support. A land-based BrahMos regiment involves mobile launchers, command and control units, radar systems, secure communication networks. Naval deployment requires integration with vertical launch systems on destroyers and frigates. Air launch deployment requires aircraft modification and pilot training. These additional costs can multiply the effective expenditure by several factors. A single missile may cost a few $1 million, but the ecosystem requires to operationalize it runs into hundreds of millions. This is where states differentiate themselves, not in acquiring weapons, but in sustaining the system that makes those weapons usable. Strategic value, cost as a function of deterrence. The real economic logic behind BrahMos lies in deterrence. A missile that can travel at nearly 3 times the speed of sound, deliver precision strikes against high value targets, creates disproportionate psychological and strategic impact. The cost must therefore be evaluated against the value of targets it can neutralize, such as aircraft carriers, command centers, or critical infrastructure. From a deterrence perspective, the cost is justified if it forces adversaries to invest disproportionately in defense systems. This creates an asymmetric economic burden where a relatively small offensive investment compels a much larger defensive expenditure. In this sense, BrahMos functions not as a weapon but as an economic instrument of strategic pressure. Export economics and market positioning. BrahMos is also a commercial product in the global arms market. India has positioned it as a high performance export option for friendlier nations. The deal with Philippines, valued at approximately $375 million for a coastal defense system, illustrates how the missile is packaged not just as hardware but as a comprehensive defensive solution. Export pricing includes not only the missiles but also training, maintenance, support systems. This allows the producing capability to capture more value per transaction. It also creates long-term dependence relationship where the buyer relies on the supplier for upgrades and spare parts. Technological sovereignty and cost justification. Another dimension of cost is technological sovereignty. Developing and producing a system like BrahMos reduces dependency on foreign suppliers for critical system capabilities. This has a strategic value that exceeds direct financial metrics. The ability to design, manufacture, and upgrade such systems internally enhances national autonomy in defense decision making. However, this autonomy comes at a cost. Indigenous development often involves inefficiencies, redundancy, and higher initial expenditure compared to import ready made systems. The BrahMos program represents a calculated decision to absorb these costs in exchange for long term strategic independence. Future trajectory, escalating costs, and capability arms race. The trajectory of a missile technology suggests a steady escalation in cost. As systems evolve from supersonic to hypersonic speeds, the engineering challenges multiply. Materials must material must Materials must withstand extreme thermal stress. Guidance systems must operate under plasma interference, and propulsion system must achieve sustained high speed combustion. The anticipated cost of BrahMos 2 reflects this reality. Moving from Mark 3 to Mark 7 is not a linear upgrade, it is an exponential leap in complexity. This will push costs into a higher bracket, potentially limiting production volume and making such systems exclusive to a few technologically advanced states. Conclusion: the price of speed, precision, and power. The cost of a BrahMos is not arbitrary. It is the outcome of layered trade offs between speed, survivability, precision, and strategic impact. At a few $1 million per unit, it represents a calculated investment in a capability that can alter battlefield dynamics and influence geopolitical calculations. The critical failure point is analyzing such systems in focusing on nominal cost rather than functional value. A cheaper missile that fails to penetrate defenses is economically inferior to a more expensive one that generates target destruction. The BrahMos system is based. The BrahMos system is priced to operate in environments where failure is not an option. If current trends continue, the cost of advanced missile systems will rise further, driven by technological complexity and strategic competition. The question is not whether such weapons are expensive, but whether states can afford not to develop or acquire them.